The minimum axle spacing between axle groups are as follows: 3 meters for 2 single axle groups, 3 meters for a single axle group and a tandem axle group, 3 meters for a single axle group and a tridem axle group, 5 meters for 2 tandem axle groups, 5.5 meters for 2 tridem axle groups, 5.5 meters for a tandem axle group and a tridem axle group, and 5.5 meters for a quantum axle group and any other axle group. The allowable maximum weight is reduced by 500 kilograms for every tenth of a meter or portion thereof below the minimum specified interaxle spacing. Even if you are within the legal weight allowances based on your vehicle's tire capacity, axle group, and interaxle spacing, there are additional weight restrictions based on the configuration of your vehicle.
Okay, so now we're going to talk about interaxle spacing and weights. So we got a gravel truck, tandem drive, and a tridem pup. Okay, so to figure out the weights on this truck, what I did is I looked at the steering axle tires, and the steering axle tires are 11 inch. So to figure out the legal weights, do 11 inches times 254 times 2 because you have 2 tires. So that number comes out to be 5,600 kilograms. I just rounded up. It was just under 56. So you have some drives here. They're allowed 17,000. These are all legal weights. And then on the pup, it's a tri, so you're allowed 21,000. The only way I can get 21,000 on my pup is if my inner axle spacing, which is measured from the center of the last drive axle to the front axle on the trailer, if that measurement is 5.5 meters or greater, you're allowed 21,000 on that pup. Okay? If that 5.5 is less, 5.4, 5.3, or 5 meters, for every 10 centimeters you're under 5.5, you have to reduce your weight by 500 kilograms for every 10 centimeters. Okay, so this unit in combination with the tire size up front, you're allowed 43,600 kilograms, and those are legal weights, no permits involved. Okay, I'm standing in front of a tri-drive gravel truck with a quad wagon, 4-axle. Okay, the steering axle on this truck has got 2 tires. They're 385s. So the math on this is a little bit different than what we just did before. So with 385s, we take 385 times 10 times 2, because there's 2 tires, and that gives us 7,700 kilograms, okay? But by regulation, the max we can go on this configuration is 7,300 kilograms. So we're allowed 7,300 kilograms on the steering axle. We're allowed 23,000 kilograms on the drives with a tri-drive permit. And on our quad wagon, we're allowed up to 31,000 kilograms. Okay? So one thing we got to remember is the inner axle spacing must be 5.5 meters or greater to get the max weights. Okay? So how to measure that is, what I'm going to measure from is the last drive axle, the center of the last drive axle, to the center of the first trailer axle. That has to be 5.5 meters or greater. Okay, this combination, we're just at 5.5 meters, so we can get legal axle weights. If you're under 5.5 meters, for every 10 centimeters you're under, you've got to reduce your weight by 500 kilograms. So just remember that. So this combination, you can get 61,300 kilograms if all the inner axle spacings are correct, which they are. So you're allowed that weight. That's your GVW on this unit. Okay, so I'm in front of a quad wagon here. We've got 4-axle trailer. It's a gravel box, okay? So what I want to talk about is the weights, okay? So on this configuration, you're allowed a max of 31,000 kilograms, okay? So just don't get it in your head since you have a tandem, you're allowed 17 and 17. That's not the case. You're only allowed up to 31,000 kilograms, okay? So I'm just going to finish up on inner axle spacing. So the measurements you're allowed between 2 tandem axle groups is 5 meters. Between a tandem and tridem axle group is 5.5 meters. And from 2 tridem to tridem is 5.5 meters. So anytime you're under those measurements, you're going to have to reduce 500 kilograms for every 10 centimeters you're under those measurements, okay? Okay, so right now I'm standing in front of a steering axle on a gravel truck. It's a tandem drive gravel truck and we've got a 2-axle pup. So in Alberta you're allowed 7,300 kilograms if you have the right tire size. So the tires on the front end of this truck are 11 inch. So you take 11 inches times 254 times 2 because you have 2 tires and it's just under 5,600. So this truck would be allowed 5,600 on its steering and 17 on its drives. If the tire's in millimeters, let's say it's a 385, you take 385 times 10 times 2 because you have 2 tires, and that gives you the mass the front end can handle. Alright, now that we've covered some interaxle spacing issues, some weights, we're going to talk about fines within Alberta. So within Alberta, for every 100 kilograms you're overweight, you get charged $20 up to 5,000 kilograms. If you're above 5,000 kilograms, you're going to get charged $35 for every 100 kilograms you're overweight. Okay? Let's say if you're running under a permit for weights, so if you're over the permitted weight, you're going to get charged $25 for every 100 kilograms up to 5,000, and for over 5,000 you're going to get charged $35 for every 100 kilograms that you're overweight. So these fines add up very quickly. So in BC they've got basically a base rate, a base charge of $115. That's flat if you're overweight no matter what. And then for every 100 kilograms above that, you get charged $11.50. So now we're going to talk about self-propelled equipment. In Alberta regulation it states no self-propelled equipment, so that would be like a rubber-tired loader, a rock truck. You cannot go on a highway if a single axle group is over 11,000 kilograms or the whole machine weighs over 22,000 kilograms. Okay, so now what we're going to do is talk about dimensions. Okay, so with dimensions, I'm going to talk about flag requirements, lighting, and dimensional signs. Okay, so with that, anything 2.6 meters or 8.7 feet or wider is going to have flags by day and lights by night. The light facing forward has to be amber in color. The light facing rear is going to be red. Anything 3.05 or 10 feet is going to have the flags and lights plus dimensional signs on top of the cab of the truck or on the front bumper and also on the rear of the trailer. Anything 3.35 or 11 feet is going to have all of what we just talked about, plus it's going to have to at least have one amber flashing light visible in 365-degree directions. Most people will have 2 rotators on top of the cab. Some people may have a rotator on the cab and one on the back of the trailer. Also, loads 3.85 meters or greater, which is 12.7 feet, cannot travel from 3 p.m. preceding a stat holiday or a weekend, so that would be like on a Friday. So from 3 p.m. to midnight, let's say on Friday, loads over 3.85 meters cannot travel. But from after midnight, 12:01 midnight on, through Saturday they can travel. But also they cannot travel on a Sunday or a stat holiday. Okay, so now what we're going to do is talk about how to test your electric brake system. First step, disconnect your plug. Second step, pull the pin. Third step, hop in the cab. Pull ahead slowly, your brakes should come on. If your brakes don't come on, usually that means your battery's dead or you have a wiring issue. So let's say you get stopped by transportation. If your breakaway system doesn't work, A, you're going to get put out of service, B, you can get a $230 fine. So just remember, each time you're going to pull the trailer, first step, you're going to disconnect your power source, okay, your brake plug. Second step, pull the pin, pull forward, the brake should come on. Okay, so now we're going to do a little bit of recap on weights. So I'm going to go over some different weights and configurations. So let's say you have a 2-axle gravel truck, steering axle and drive axle. So on that steering axle, you're allowed up to 7,300 kilograms with the right tire size. That's without a permit. Your drive axle with 4 tires, you're allowed up to 9,100 kilograms. So let's say we go to a tandem drive gravel truck. Steering axle, again, you're allowed up to 7,300 kilograms with the right tire size. Whether the tire's in millimeters or it's in inches, okay? The drive axle, it's going to have 8 tires. It's a tandem. You're going to be allowed up to 17,000. These are legal axle weights. Let's say you have just a straight power unit. So 1 steer axle, 2 drives with a 5th wheel with no fixed equipment. That front steering axle, the max you're allowed without a permit is 5,500 kilograms. Anything with fixed equipment, or let's say a gravel truck, you can go up to 73. So fixed equipment would be, let's say, it's got a winch. If it's a winch tractor, you can go up to 73 on the front end. You can also permit above that, okay? So we're going to talk some configurations here. So let's say you have a tri-dome axle group on a tri-drive truck. Without a permit, you're allowed 17,000 kilograms, okay? With a permit, that tri-drive is going to be allowed 23,000 kilograms. Okay, let's say a tri-dome gravel trailer, you're going to be allowed 24,000 kilograms. With that, to get 24,000 kilograms, your axle spread is going to have to be from 3 meters to 3.7 meters. Okay, so the axle spread is the center of the front axle to the center of the back axle. Okay, that spread has to be between 3 to 3.7 meters. If you're under that, you're only going to get 21,000 on that tri-dome. Okay, so I think we've talked about all the different configurations and weights. So remember, if it's just a power unit that just has a 5th wheel, tandem drive, and 1 steering axle, you're allowed 5,500 kilograms. If you have fixed equipment, let's say you have a winch, a crane, or it's a gravel truck, you're allowed up to 7,300 kilograms on the steering axle without the permit, as long as you have the correct tire size. Okay, that was a recap.
All drivers, this is the first thing that diesel bears are going to check when you roll over the scale at the chicken house. And yes, it is your responsibility as the driver to make sure that you're in compliance with weights on your big truck. Stick around, we'll be right back with that information. Welcome back. Talking to you today about weight compliance, and yes, this is the responsibility of the driver. We're going to tell you today where to get weighed, what kind of freight is going to be heavy on your truck, and you're going to need to get weighed. We're going to show you how to make sure that your axle weights are in compliance, and show you which one of these items here are important and which ones are not. Gross vehicle weight rating is the overall weight of your truck. So tandem in Canada and the United States, this is mostly what we're going to talk about today. There are exceptions to this in Canada and the United States, but mostly in North America, tandem is what we're going to be hauling. 2 axles on the back of the truck, 2 axles on the trailer. So overall gross vehicle weight rating is 80,000 pounds in the United States. In Canada, it's 39,500 kilograms. It's a bit more in Canada than it is in the States. You're also going to have to know, for the purposes of truck driving school, gross combination weight rating. That's a compliance according to the federal motor regulations standards there in the United States. Net weight is the weight of the freight with its packaging. So the shrink wrap, the boxes, anything that it's packaged in, the straps, the pallets, those types of things. Also sometimes referred to as dunnage, anything that helps you to secure the load down. And then tare weight is just the weight of the freight without any of its packaging. So these are some other terms that you need to know, but this one here is the one that you need to take note of, because you need to know in the States 80,000 pounds, in Canada 39,500 pounds. If you're hauling Super Bs or you're hauling a Tridem, which is 3 axles on the back of a trailer, then you're going to need to know what the weights are for those, and the company that you work for will train you on that for compliance. Now, if you're hauling anything more than that, you're going to need an overweight permit and an oversized permit, particularly in the United States, and your company will take care of that, and all the details will be on it, and they will train you for that. Bridge law, you need to know what bridge law is. It's 41 feet between the kingpin on the trailer and the center of the axles at the back of the trailer. And the reason for bridge law is that bridges are engineered so that they can only hold up so much weight per linear foot or linear meter, and you need to have this in place as well. Otherwise, you're not going to be in compliance with your weights and your axle weights and those types of things. Freight that is going to be heavy is going to be liquid, steel, paper, wood, and produce. If you're hauling a reefer trailer, a temperature controlled trailer, and you have a load of apples on, it's going to be heavy. Wood, usually on flat decks. Paper, they will put paper in your trailer if it's a van trailer. And steel, recycled steel, scrap metal, they will put it on if they got it on pallets and those types of things. Or rolls of steel will be heavy. And anything, juice, bottles of water, if you're hauling tanker trailers, then all of these are going to be heavy, and you're going to have to weigh your truck before you get to the scale where the DOT officers are waiting for you. And if you're hauling a flat deck, usually what they're going to have is they're going to have gauges on the air suspension, because as you put more weight on the truck, the amount of air pressure in the suspension is going to increase, and you can usually know within about 500 pounds what the gauges are on your truck and trailer, and that will give you an indication. And flat decks, they usually do this because timber mills and those types of things, steel mills and whatnot, are out in the middle of nowhere, and before you get to a scale, you want to make sure that you're in compliance. The United States is fairly simple in terms of a tandem. As I said, 2 axles on the tractor, 2 axles on the trailer, 80,000 pounds including fuel and the freight, 12,000 pounds on the steer axle, 34,000 on the tandems, and 34,000 on the tandems. This also includes your fuel. Do not go and get loaded to the maximum amount of weight that you're allowed on the truck and have a quarter tank of fuel, because if you're driving from California to South Carolina, it's going to be a long trip if you have to fuel up and keep it at a quarter tank of fuel for the whole way. And don't underestimate this, because if you've got tanks that hold 300 gallons of fuel, that's 3,000 pounds of fuel on your truck, and you have to factor that in for your overall gross vehicle weight. If you're running in a state that allows you a Tridem, they allow 42,000 pounds on the Tridem, and it's going to be 88,000 pounds overall gross vehicle weight. In Canada, it's 39,500 kilograms on a tandem, 5,500 kilograms on the steer axles, 17 on each one of the tandems. And if you're running a Tridem in Canada, most provinces will allow 23,000 kilograms on your Tridem on the back, which gives you 45,500 kilograms overall gross vehicle weight. And this is what you need to know to be in compliance. After the freight is loaded on your truck, you're going to know whether you need to go and get scaled or not, because you're going to know it's heavy. It's paper, it's liquid, juice, timber, whatnot. Where do I find a scale? If you ask at the shipper that loaded your truck where there's a scale, they will be able to tell you where you can find a scale. Now, these are the places that you can usually find a scale. Definitely at truck stops. Quarries will have scales, salvage yards, public scales. These are rare, but you can find them. Logging mills, recycling depots, places that they recycle paper and whatnot will have scales. And then, of course, there's the DOT scales. If the scale's not open, they leave the scale on for you so you can go over and run over the scale and know whether you're in compliance or not. So these are the places that you can find scales. There's going to be 2 types of scales. Most of the scales at the truck stops are going to be CAT scales. They're going to be axle weights and an overall gross vehicle weight. So when you pull your truck onto the scale, they're going to weigh each one of the axles, and they'll give you the weight, and you'll know whether you're in compliance for axle weights and overall gross vehicle weight. Those are the easiest, and so you pay a fee. Usually at the CAT scales, it's $15 or $20 for your first weigh, and then after that, it's going to be a percentage of that for your reweigh, so it's going to be less. The company does pay for this, okay? You don't pay for this as a driver. If you're an owner-operator, then yes, you do pay to get weighed, but that's part of running your business. Then if you figure out that your overall gross vehicle weight is correct, but you've got too much weight on the trailer, then what you need to do is you need to slide the tandems back on the trailer to move some of the weight up onto the back of the truck. Now, in all my years of experience, you can slide the 5th wheel plate on the back of the tractor, but I've never had to do that to adjust weight. The only time I've had to move the 5th wheel plate on the tractor is to make sure that the dollies on the trailer don't bang into the mud flaps and tear them off on the back of the truck. Other than that, for weight compliance, it's always been moving the axles on the trailer. You move them back to put weight on the trailer. You move them forward to put more weight on the trailer. And oftentimes you'll have to either mess with that. Now, they'll have pins on here. Each one of these pins is approximately 500 pounds. So you're going to have to move it back and forwards. Do not adjust your axles on the scale. Go off the scale, adjust these, and then go back on and do your reweigh. Truck stops and DOT scales are going to be axle weights. These other places are all going to be platform scales for the most part. To get your axle weights on a platform scale, before you pull onto the scale, go in and talk to the weighmaster, figure out how much it's going to cost you, and tell him or her that you need axle weights. And what you'll do is you'll pull on with just the tractor, you'll weigh the steer axles, and then you'll pull on with just the truck. You'll weigh the truck, the weighmaster will tell you to pull on, and then you'll weigh the entire unit. Then you'll pull off the scale, you'll go in, the weighmaster will give you 3 weights. They'll give you the steer axle weights, they'll give you the weight of the tractor, and then they'll give you the weight of the whole truck. And you have to do a simple bit of math to be able to figure out your steer axle. You already have your steer axle by itself because you weighed this by itself. And then for the tandems on the truck, you take the second weight and subtract the first weight from that to get your truck tandems. And then to get your trailer tandems, you take the third weight and you subtract the second weight from that third weight to get your trailer tandems. And that's how you figure out axle weights on a platform scale, which is going to be most of these here, except the truck stop and the DOT scales. I went over this fairly quickly. I have a short course, less than $10, over at the Smart Drive Test website. Click the link up in the corner. You can go over there and sign up for that course, and that will give you exercises to figure out what your axle weights are and how to figure this out, and more details about all of this, where to find scales, what happens if you're hauling flat decks and those types of things. So it's a really good course. Save you money so that you don't get a ticket at the DOT scale, because remember, if you get a fine for being overweight or your axle weights are not in compliance, the fine goes to you, not the company. The only thing the company pays for is for you to weigh your truck. They don't pay for the weight, and you may even get fired if you have freight on here and it has to be moved and they have to call a crane out to the scale house, because oftentimes if the freight has to be adjusted or moved on the truck or trailer, or if you're driving just a straight truck, then that charge could go to you and you could definitely be fired. We had this happen a few times when I was working at a flat deck company hauling timber, that they had to haul cranes out and bring another truck out to put the excess weight onto another truck. All of this costs thousands and thousands of dollars. So be in compliance. Head over to the Smart Drive Test website and sign up for that course and get a certificate at the end that you took this course on weight compliance. Another feather in your cap when you're going to apply for jobs. For another video, click here. To subscribe, click here. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Have a great day. Bye now.